How, according to quality of conceptions, people's population in a natural way is regulated in different scenarios. Questions are sometimes asked. How will all of humanity approach those worlds? In which Iissiidiology will be of interest to most people. You just think that everything happens here so naturally. That person who did not care will begin to care, will start to show himself precisely in such qualities that which he is manifested in the future world. In fact, all happens differently. There are cosmic laws, cosmic principles that affect all cosmic objects, planetary entities, star entities, galactic entities, and all forms of self-consciousness that are inside of those entities, that structure the material side of these entities. The material side with different densities. These laws require certain mechanisms that are functionally responsible for each of their levels of exhiberation, manifestation, for manifestations of life in the shape of self-consciousness form, in one or other level of existence, on this or other planet, on this or other cosmic object, whether it is a star or more global galactic entity, as galaxy or other systems of cosmic creativity, our solar system, as well as many other systems that resonate with it, resonating according to particular features, currently have approached the realization of certain functional mechanisms that contribute to the regulation of interrelations between self-consciousness forms that structure these former systems. For example, our planetary entity. It is included in the solar system, that it is not limited to only our planet that revolve around our sun, but also indicates hundreds of objects that are outside of visibility, of visual perception, beyond the optical range, but also play an equally important role in the existence and functioning of this whole system. The fact that our continuum is now very bloated, it can be said that it experiences a special state.
The current stage of our continuum, of our humanity's collective consciousness, can be compared with the before mitosis stage, when an indirect cell division takes place. But here I would say that not into two parts do we split, but into many parts. This continuum mitosis occurs in a variety of different directions, and depending on the self-consciousness states in which the form is present. So how is this manifested, this so-called bloating of our continuum? In the fact that have formed, it has been organized in self-consciousness systems that are already at the stage of incompatibility with each other. Approximately 2/3 of humanity is at a very low functioning level of personality self-consciousness. These are people with primitive thinking, primitive needs, in whose focus dynamics dominate animal instincts, fears, and aggression. I would say non-rationality, non-logics, or primitive rationality. Such people are about 1/3 of humanity. Half are people who have crossed the rationality boundary, who can sensibly manifest themselves, behave reasonably, but interests of which are completely absorbed with materiality. These people are in a greater degree selfish. Their interests do not go beyond their not large cell, which is their family, their clan, tribe, or nation at best, and whose purpose of existence is survival, comfortable existence, survival at the expense of others, etc., and mainly animal intuition, i.e. the gastrointestinal one, dominates in them, and all their existence is about having here and now, as much as possible, and they do not know anything else. Their informational awareness is very low, very weak. Intellect is practically not developed. Intuition at the subconscious level is not developed. They are afraid of the new, fear of something unknown, and have neither any desire nor any interest to develop themselves in terms of the spirituality or in general terms of self-development. These are about half of such people on our planet. Well, and somewhere around 10 to 15% of people who have reached high enough level of intellectual development. But this differentiates these people the fact that in one part of the 10 to 15% of the population prevails technocratic conceptions about mankind's development. That is, where the intellect, reasoning prevails over everything else, where rationalism, the feasibility is almost reduced to cynicism, to heartlessness, to very harsh relations in terms of survival for only the intellectually developed, etc. In the second part, of the 10 to 15% too, are people who have a fairly high level of intellectual development, but who understand that without heart, without cordiality, without the development of sensuality, intellect turns into a powerful destructive weapon against the collective consciousness of humanity.
How can these first two parts be connected with this part? How can they live at the same time building one harmonious community? In no way. Here to allocate those forms of self-consciousness to different continuums that are more appropriate for their configurations exist such mechanisms that we call pandemic. For example, viruses, germs, bacteria that react to certain energy activity in focus dynamics, in manifestations of an individual, are attracted into configuration of this individual, is being pushed into its biological body, and begins to produce the corresponding manipulation at the cellular level. That is to restructure not only the genome, or rather not only the cell itself, into cytoplasmic structure, but also is pushed into the genome and thus, due to mutations, due to various deletions, to make appropriate changes in the self-consciousness of a person. Because of that takes place many revitalizations, or so-called deaths, which result in refocusing of the person to the next, more suitable for the foremost system of the world's continuum, that in a greater degree meet its interests, and where it can realize what is typical for it in every moment of its existence.
Thus, during pandemics, occurs a reallocation of many people to many different types of continuums. People who are intellectually developed and prone to some rationalistic realizations will refocus to typical for them continuums, where they find an opportunity for self-realization. People whose views are associated with the development of intellectual and altruistic relations will refocus to such scenarios, to such continuums, where they can apply their ideas and their interests. People who are fixed on materiality, on commercialism, on some narrow interests, on selfishness, will refocus to their own continuums and conditions of existence. Primitive people, for whom animal instincts are typical, selfishness, self-centeredness, they, after death, after revitalization, after a series of such revitalizations, find and begin to realize themselves in a more appropriate for them conditions of existence.
So, in the future continuums, towards which you all strive so much, in human worlds where intellect and altruism finds the most reflection in focus dynamics of population, of collective consciousness, where Iissiidiology and science are already deeply integrated and complement each other in various areas of development. There exist, well, in any case of the time that I can remember, no more than 1.5 billion of people. But these are people who are united together with all the set of their common interest and their common development trends, synthesis, creative realization, and who are endowed with the ability to organize their surrounding reality much more effectively than what is allowed to us now, than what now is given to us. And they, who are they? It is such part of us that continue to study Iissiidiology, continue the cultivation in itself of a VAR lifestyle, that irrespective of everything, continues to build IIDC and AVARs on the planet. There are such of us who were able to overcome all of these obstacles and were able to join into such group, into such collective consciousness that in much greater degree has harmonious structure and more harmonious energy for our own constructive work than what we now have the opportunity to observe. Rationalists too, intellectuals, will refocus into their own continuums. Some of them are not such fanatics of rational, technocratic development. Part of them is the border of these continuums in one. Then, in another, revitalization takes place. The focus dynamics gradually stabilizes in one or another collective consciousness. And part of them proceeds from these intellectual, altruistic continuums into intellectual, technocratic ones, and form from there to here.
The transition, redistribution to different continuums of all that number of unevenly developed people, opposing one another because of their configurations, because of the level of their development, is also done by means of an inversion ray refocusing principle. So what takes place is a powerful influence from the outside. Comes a powerful influence from outside, from the space. The powerful flow of certain vibrations helps the activation of some levels of self-consciousness. Again, according to the principle of a pandemic, the principle of viruses, bacteria, but only without their participation. Like viruses, bacteria resonationally, synchronously penetrate our biological body. So, and rays stimulate the development of various levels of our Iissiidi centers in our self-consciousness, and actually takes place the effect of an instant revitalizational transformation. That is, in some scenarios, is being observed what we call death. In some scenarios, nothing happens. These happen only with different feelings, different self-awareness, and understanding of the surrounding reality, a more qualitative one, a higher one, a more harmonious one, and there automatically appear our abilities. Due to the fact that synchronization of certain levels of the cerebral hemispheres takes place, they begin to actively interact with each other, chains are formed, the respective centers are activated, which had no opportunity to be realized previously due to the lack of activity of certain levels, and society begins to be organized in a completely different way. And the economy is different, and attitude to work is different, and the technique is completely different, and the ways of realization are completely different.
So this utopia about which many people ask, not understanding the essence of it, how can all this happen? It has no place for existence. So it will never happen that gradually all parts of the population of the globe would approach such high levels of existence to harmoniously interact with one another. There is too large of a different interest, too large of a difference in prospects, in creative potential between the majority of population and such part that has already been able to develop some signs of a higher morality, higher intellect, and higher conceptions about themselves.
The great role here plays the hormonal activity of the human being. We do not know when it will happen, when this inversion ray refocusing will happen. But it will happen according to the principle of some presence in your body of a stable concentration of some hormonal substances. For example, a person who is accustomed to stress, aggression, negative perception, in his blood the levels of testosterone, epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol are constantly high. And each of these substances has its own vibration, its own energy informational configuration. And during the inversion ray refocusing, the activity of exactly these vibrations that are typical for these hormones will be the decisive factor for the quality of your refocusing. So it will be defined automatically to which of the worlds, to which of the continuums you will go to. A more positive activity, a more harmonious human realization types, these contribute to the release of oxytocin, to the presence in the blood of increased levels of oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, endorphins. That is, the person is present in a peaceful state, and always in a positive one. He perceives everything around also very positively, in a balanced way, without stress. And in such a way, at the time of the inversion ray refocusing in its configuration, exactly these high-frequency vibrations of these hormonal substances will have the greatest activity, and hence the revitalization will happen into such continuums where these hormonal substances are stabilized in our focus dynamics, where oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins, and other substances, new hormonal and neurotransmittal substances, are typical for our future nature, and which determine our existence accordingly.
What can I recommend? I would advise you to pay attention to the hormonal activity, to the fact that any non-positive reactions, any destructive states provoke the presence in your blood of relatively high potential of adrenaline, norepinephrine, testosterone, cortisol. And if at that moment the inversion ray refocusing will happen, when you will direct yourself to such variant where the world around you is even worse than the one you are observing now. Why? Because you will apprehend yourself where these vibration of hormonal substances can be realized. That is in destruction, in some aggressive actions, in selfishness, etc. And the more peaceful, positive attitude, harmonious attitude to everything else that is going on around you and with you, the desire to be stabilized in these conditions, to sustain yourself constantly, will induce in your brain, in your body, more high-frequency substances, which will determine the quality of your revitalization during the intervention ray process.